This week, New Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre clashed with the Liberal Deputy Prime Minister, Trudeau Freeland. And while rumors began circulating indicating that the ArriveCAN app will be lifted, Conservatives explain their first priority is the economy, and parliamentarians debate tax hikes and employment insurance as well. This is Rebel News' Parliamentary Weekly Recap. Hey everyone, this is William Diaz, your Ottawa-based reporter with Rebel News, and today let me talk you through this week's highlights from what happened in Parliament. Let's get right to it. Let's begin with, Monday. Well, Justin Trudeau declared the date a federal mourning day due to the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, unfortunately. Therefore, the members of Parliament were set to sit on Tuesday instead. That same day, rumors claiming that the ArriveCAN app was set to be lifted by September 30th began emerging, moving on to Tuesday, September 20th. The MPs were back in Parliament to debate and discuss little do you know, Justin Trudeau was nowhere to be seen. He was still flying around the world in his private jet. And oh, did I mention our national drama teacher is also a singer now? Take a listen to his performance in a bar in London when he went to attend the funeral of the Queen and embarrassed Canada on the international level. But back in Ottawa now, where MPs were sitting, and Poilievre's first statement addressed the Liberals' inflationary measures, tax hikes, and more economic issues, blasting Trudeau's party basically. Why won't they cancel the tax hike, he asked. Take a look.
Vaporized by inflation, which is costing families over $2,000 in extra cost. And that does not include the increased interest rate prices that people are paying on their mortgages. In fact, the average family could pay their housing bill with 32% of their paycheck every month. Now, that's 50% after 7 years of this Prime Minister in power. What's his solution? To raise taxes on paychecks with higher EI and CPP premiums that will shrink paychecks and higher taxes on gas, groceries, and heat. Why won't they cancel these tax hikes so that Canadians can keep a roof over their heads?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker. First of all, it's important to talk about the fact that he's talking about EI and CPP, things that are important for people who've lost their jobs or for seniors when they're planning.
The price of housing in this country and give us the second worst housing bubble of any country on planet Earth. Now, Canadians have had the cost they must pay for monthly housing bills go from 32% of their paycheck to 50% of their paycheck. And what's the Prime Minister's solution? To reduce their paychecks by taking a bigger bite out of them with higher payroll taxes. And he wants to raise gas taxes, home heating taxes, and indirectly the price of groceries by tripling the carbon tax. Will the government cancel these tax hikes so that Canadians can afford to eat, heat, and house themselves?
This was the same day NDP Member of Parliament Charlie Angus spoke about how much of a threat disinformation and misinformation is. Right, Charlie, obviously.
Speaker, democracy is a fragile thing, and we all need to do more in an age of disinformation, conspiracy theory, and the rising threat of political intimidation. We need to rebuild trust with Canadians, and I make it my promise in this session of Parliament to work harder to maintain the trust of the people who sent me here.
More from the NDP that same day, Jagmeet Singh claimed that the way Poilievre answered David Akin, Global News' chief political correspondent, also known by some as a Liberal heckler, showed weakness. Let's first see Akin's behavior.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your presence here today. Before I begin, let me just say that thank you very much. I'm being heckled here by. Thank you very much for your congratulation. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to begin my remarks now.
But will you take some questions afterwards?
This is coming from the same man, Jagmeet Singh, who consistently refuses to answer polite questions from Rebel News' reporter. Here's what wise Jagmeet had to say.
But he called that journalist a liberal heckler. What do you think about that?
I watched the video, and from one perspective, it sounded like someone was interrupting him. And then when I saw the cutaway, and this is an important thing for people to do, sometimes you see one view and it looks like, okay, maybe it was some heckling. And then I saw the full view of what happened, and it was just a question, are you going to take questions? Or why aren't you taking questions? And it seemed a pretty normal thing, something that's happened to me before. People ask if I'm going to take questions. It seems like a pretty standard thing if I'm going to come before a group of folks, professionals whose job it is to write the news, that they're going to ask me some questions about my positions. I kind of expect that. And the fact that instead of taking questions or saying, no, I'm not going to take questions, simple answer, to make it into an attack seemed a bit weak as a response. Like, why not just say no or say, yeah, I'll take questions? And so it seemed like a bit of a weak approach to then somehow make it into someone's partisan political position. And I think it's an example of a lack of the strength to be able to stand up and say what you want and defend your position.
That same day, I took the streets of Ottawa and asked Conservative MPs what they believe should be the party's main focus, and how they are feeling about Poilievre as their party's leader. Here's what some of them told me. What do you think should be the main issue that Conservatives focus on heading into this parliamentary session?
Well, the big thing we talked about today was inflation. So inflation's the big number, right? Everyone feels it.
Yeah.
It's great to have a bold leader with strong conviction and vision, and the caucus is very inspired and united behind him.
I think Poilievre's a great leader, and I chaired his campaign in New Brunswick, and I think we're going to do great things with him as a leader. Absolutely.
Also, that Canadians are tired of this failed and corrupt Liberal government, and they're looking to us, and we have the leader with the experience and the ability to communicate and resonate, and looking forward to working with our entire team, with Pierre, as we enter the fall sitting.
Wednesday, the action began. A heated Poilievre-Freeland exchange occurred, where Freeland accused the leader of the CPC of being misguided. Both talked about EI, employment insurance, basically, and tried to compete to figure out whether it was Stephen Harper or Justin Trudeau who had the lowest EI contributions.
And so I want you to guess what EI premiums were in 2015. $1.88. And guess who was the minister in charge? The current Conservative leader. Now guess what EI premiums will be next year? $1.63. That is 25 cents lower. So the leader of the official opposition needs to tell Canadians, was he misguided then, or is he misguided now?
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Neither, Mr. Speaker. Guess what Canadians paid in 2015 in EI if they earned $60,000 in 2015? $930. Guess what they pay now? $948. That is an increase. Furthermore, if you look at total payroll taxes, they've gone from $3,400 to $4,100 under this government. That's a $700 increase, and the government plans to raise EI premiums. That's the paycheck tax on January 1st, along with other taxes. Why won't they cancel these tax hikes so Canadians can pay their bills?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives used to be a party that had a few core economic principles. They used to believe in saving for your retirement. They used to believe in fiscal responsibility and in a well-funded EI system. In fact, when the current Conservative leader was the minister responsible for EI, he actually presided over an EI premium 25 cents higher than the one that will go into effect next year. So the Conservatives need to pick a lane. What do they really stand for these days?
The Honourable Member.
Transport Minister Omar Algara, also known by some as our editor-in-chief Sheila Gunn-Reid as the Transport Goblin, was questioned by reporters on the potential lifting of the ArriveCAN app, the mandatory vaccination tracking app for returning travelers to Canada. Here's what our small Transport Goblin had to say about the rumors.
Why remove ArriveCAN at this point?
Look, first of all, ArriveCAN is a critical tool to process travelers with the requirement of the vaccine mandate. So we're asking, it's a tool that helps process arrivals as they arrive.
So you want to keep it mandatory beyond September 30th?
There's no decision has been made. We are, as we've said all along,
final decision's been made,
we're constantly assessing the situation and making decisions based on the information.
So you think it should remain beyond September 30th?
Conservative MP for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lake, Michael Barrett spoke to some reporters about the federal COVID mandates and the ArriveCAN app, and seemed to have a different perspective from the transport minister. Barrett also touched on New Democrats' beloved so-called dental care plan, which he claims isn't a dental care plan at all. The government will be sending checks to some folks, he said.
We've seen that they've been out of step with the provinces all along the way. We've heard just in the last couple of days media reports, nothing from government, that they're going to lift the ArriveCAN app and the mandatory vaccination requirement at borders effective on the 30th of September. I'm not sure what's changed in their in the epidemiological evaluation of risk to Canadians that's happening on September 30th that hasn't happened today. So we know it's hurting our small businesses, border communities, tourism sector, all the days in between and all the days preceding that they weren't aligned with their provincial counterparts in their risk assessment. So definitely would need to take a look at what the health minister is proposing, but it's there's a lot of questions that Canadians have why the government appeared to be making decisions not based on medical science but based on political calculations, political science for many months. Look, the government's not proposing a dental care plan. They're going to be sending checks to some folks, and this is something that's clearly outside the jurisdiction of the federal government. Healthcare is a provincial responsibility, and on healthcare, the Prime Minister has refused to meet with premiers to discuss the healthcare situation in Canada for more than 2 years. And while we have regulatory changes that could be made. We have medical professionals not able to work within their full scope of practice in this country. There's lots of things the Prime Minister could be doing to address Canadians' access to medical care, Canadians who are dealing with emergency rooms that are closed, Canadians who are missing those care and screening appointments. The Prime Minister's not doing any of that. He's satisfying a power grab deal that he has with the NDP.
His colleague MP Kevin Vaugh also spoke with mainstream media reporters in West Block, where he had a tense exchange with them. Here, take a look for yourself.
Being changed, the ArriveCAN app.
What's that?
The Trudeau government is apparently looking at potentially getting rid of the vaccine mandate.
Long overdue.
Come talk to us about it.
Just step forward for a second.
Long overdue?
Why?
So can we get the
Well,
audio?
I've had a number of constituents that haven't seen their parents who live elsewhere in the world for over 2 years. Was that fair to them? So finally, where is the science in this? There is no science. Finally, they have wakened up because we have a new leader, and the polls are not favorable for the Liberals. So now, guess what they did?
Why do you think
Something they should have done a year ago.
Why do you think it has anything to do with Pierre Poilievre?
Have you looked at the polling?
Well, how does this issue connect with polling at all? I'm trying to understand.
Why do you think?
I'm asking.
How many young people have come out for our new leader? I mean, they're in trouble.
Are those young people all coming out because of the ArriveCAN issue?
Well, there's the other issue. There's the other issue. Our tourism industry is on its knees right now, thanks to this government not allowing people to come into this country. On the other side, the Toronto Blue Jays are good, so they're home openers now in the playoffs. They can welcome players from Philadelphia, from New York, and Seattle now. Isn't that good? We finally have a level playing field in this country for Major League Baseball.
Here are some excerpts of other noteworthy exchanges that occurred that day during question period.
We have the strongest economic growth and the lowest deficit in the G7.
Now the Liberals would have Canadians believe that they've never had it so good. Well, I guess if you're jetting around the world singing songs in a beautiful lobby, then that might be true. But if you are the 30-year-old stuck living in your parents' basements because the Liberals have doubled housing prices, you might disagree. If you can't fill up your tank with the gas, you might disagree.
Taking the strongest action in a generation to keep communities safe from gun violence. We're working closely with the Quebec government and municipal leaders like Mayor Plante to make communities in Quebec safer. We've directed $46 million to support law enforcement in Quebec, $42 million in Quebec to steer youth away from a life of crime.
It's exasperating, Mr. Speaker. Everyone in Quebec can see that there are more illegal weapons than ever before in Montreal. But this is the same government that is in charge of passports, airports, and Roxham Road. It keeps telling us that everything is going just fine. No, this is a festival of failure, Mr. Speaker.
Is this real life? Because that answer was pure fantasy. We have inflation, landslides, and no escape from poverty. When will the Prime Minister open up his eyes and see he's not a poor boy, but he should have some sympathy? For too many Canadians, opportunity had just begun, and now this government is going to throw it all away. Money is not easy come, easy go in this economy. So when will the government cancel their planned tax increases on gas, home heating, and groceries and spare us from this inflation monstrosity?
Now come Thursday, Conservative MP brought forward a petition demanding the end of the ArriveCAN app. I quote, petitioners are calling the government and the Minister of Transport to end all federally regulated COVID-19 vaccine mandates and restrictions. He also pointed out the fact that the vast majority of the industrialized nations around the globe have lifted theirs, and rhetorically asked why the Canadian government hasn't followed suit.
Speaker, I'm presenting a petition on behalf of Canadians who want a permanent end to the ArriveCAN app, the vaccine mandates, and all COVID mandates. Currently, the government has only suspended some of the mandates, but thanks to the opposition pressure, they will be getting rid of the ArriveCAN app and the border mandates. The petitioners note that other countries around the world have removed all their vaccine mandates and restrictions. Petitioners are calling on the government and the Minister of Transport to end all federally regulated COVID-19 vaccine mandates and restrictions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Trudeau was also back in Parliament for the first time. Finally, his return was long awaited, and the Conservative leader did not wait a second to challenge him over the carbon tax and upcoming tax hikes. As anticipated by anyone who regularly watches House of Commons proceedings, Trudeau did not answer the question. Watch how their exchange went.
Has effectively admitted that his carbon tax has not worked, and therefore he needs to triple it. According to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, the forthcoming hike in the carbon tax will mean that the total cost for a Newfoundland senior living in the countryside on their heating bill will have been 80%. Canadians cannot afford that. But just for clarity, if you are a Newfoundland senior, how much will your home heating bill rise as a result of the forthcoming hike in the Liberal carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like all parliamentarians, we have each heard stories from Canadians who are struggling with the high cost of living, with the inflation that's been caused by the global crisis. That's why we're putting forward concrete measures that are going to help Canadians. We're going to double the GST tax credit that's going to hit millions of families with extra support. We're delivering on support for low-income families on dental, and we're also moving forward with support for low-income renters. The Leader of the Opposition has an opportunity to support these measures and get help directly to Canadians. I hope he does exactly that.
The Honourable.
Later, Liberal MP Mark Gerretsen had a meltdown over Michael Barrett, saying the Liberals and the NDPs are a partner in crime, contributing to what an NDP member of Parliament said was the greedflation.
Well, Speaker, I am delighted to take this question from the Honourable Member because he asked about courage. And I'm going to show that courage right now to him and to all Canadians. And we're going to stand up against, and we are going to call out the partners in crime who are pickpocketing Canadians, who are perpetrating greedflation. Because as
heckled before I've even made my point of order. The member just said partners in crime. Is he suggesting that, number one, the Liberal government and the Liberal bench is participating in criminal activity, and to that extent, is the NDP partnering on that crime? I think that's extremely offensive, Mr. Speaker, and the member should remove that comment immediately.
Very interesting conversations in here today about people using turns of phrase, and so I find it's on this point of order, and Speaker, in my comments, I hadn't even finished my comment, so I'm not sure if the member has a guilty conscience, but I didn't accuse the Liberals of committing a crime.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes referred to the NDP as partners in crime. In doing so, he is suggesting that the Liberal bench, the government, and the Liberal members of Parliament are engaging in criminal activity, and he is also extending that to suggest that the NDP are partnering in that criminal activity. I suggested to you moments ago that you make the suggestion to the member to remove that comment. You asked him if he wanted to do that. Instead, he doubled down on it. I would suggest that you ask him once again.
All right, let me.
Finally, here are some of the highlights from Friday's question period as well.
With Canadians now spending more on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined, and with this coinciding with 40-year highs in inflation, 40-year highs in food price increases, with reports of students in Toronto forced to live in homeless shelters. The government's plan is to raise taxes on paychecks, on gas, on heat, and on other essentials. In fact, they want to triple the carbon tax. Now is not the time for a tax hike. Will the government cancel these planned tax increases?
It is incredibly unfortunate that the leader of the Conservative Party has tried to tackle inflation and tackle affordability by giving investment advice on highly speculative assets. For those Canadians who did follow the advice of the leader of the opposition, I am truly sorry that you lost your life savings. But as long as he's giving that investment advice, I think Canadians should ask, if we can't trust him to be our stockbroker, why would we want him to be our Prime Minister?
That's right.
Why the Conservatives are attacking our Canadian pension system.
Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, rising home prices and rising interest rates mean that the income necessary to qualify to buy a tiny entry-level apartment in Calgary has nearly doubled in the past year. The last thing that these cash-strapped Canadians need is another bite taken out of their paychecks. Will the government cancel their planned tax increases on paychecks?
Mr. Speaker, if there's something that I agree with my colleague on, it's that people throughout the country are having trouble buying a house. What we don't agree about is that the Conservatives on the other side from the very beginning have voted against all government measures that would help people access housing.
That the government has backed down from requiring people to use the disastrous ArriveCAN app or follow the unscientific vaccine mandates just across the border, but the inconsistency remains. The government now admits that it is safe for an unvaccinated person to get on an airplane, to work in a government office, but unsafe for that same person to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. This is obviously unscientific and contradictory. Will the government follow scientific consistency and give our brave men and women their jobs back?
I'm glad to hear the member speak about science. 200,000, Mr. Speaker. That's a number of deaths of people who unnecessarily died in the United States because of the relatively lower vaccination rate that they had compared to Canada. That's an outcome which we didn't see in Canada, we can be very proud of. Thank you.
The farmers that feed our cities are taking on massive losses with no end in sight. What's the government's plan? Take more of their hard-earned money? Canadians shouldn't have to be bailing out this government's poor economic planning.
We're working hard to strengthen the Canadian pension plan. The Conservatives are trying to argue that we can make life more affordable by raiding the pension benefits of seniors in the future. Why the opposition wants to deprive Canadians of their retirement security when they need it the most, it's beyond me, but I can tell you it's very troubling public policy.
Will this government cancel its planned paycheck tax increase? Yes or no?
Carbon pricing is widely recognized by nearly everyone, including in this House, except the Conservative Party, as the most economically efficient way to reduce emission while driving clean innovation and creating jobs.
Russia has announced plans for sham referendums in the Ukrainian territories it has invaded. It is clear that Russia's war is only about Vladimir Putin's desire to redraw the map using force. Ukrainians' territory must remain Ukraine's.
Well, there you have it. Here's everything you need to know about what went on in Ottawa this week. Make sure to tune in next Friday where I will walk you through next week's most important occurrences. If you found value in this content, please make sure to share. For Rebel News, this is William Diaz.